Welcome to Direct, which is the way, or the Hebrew word for way. And this is a show where we meditate on the way by walking through the Psalms, which are about the way of God. And today, our meditation is on Psalm 62. My name is John Mark Hicks, and welcome to Direct.
Welcome. My name is Bobby Valentine. We are honored that you have found our channel and you are watching with us as we do meditate on the way, a way of life before God that we learn by praying the Psalms, meditating on the Psalms. They show us a certain way to live in this world before God and with one another. It's a challenging way sometimes, as we'll see today, and we are glad that you are with us.
Well, Psalm 62, Bobby, is we could call it a psalm of trust or a confidence psalm. It expresses a certain orientation toward
Yeah.
God that is embedded in the story of God, trusting the story of God, trusting who God is and what God is doing. But where do we locate this psalm in the Psalter? How do we contextualize this psalm in the Psalter itself?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, Psalm 62 is part of Book 2 of the Psalter. We will remember that the Psalms is broken up into 5 books. They are Book 1 is chapters 1 through 41, and Book 2 is 42 through 72, and Book 3 is 73 through 89, and Book 4 is 90 through 106, and Book 5 is 107 through 150. And in Book 2, we have sort of a valley that you go through, a cluster of congregational and individual laments that I oftentimes call this book the capital of mystery and lament, and hope comes in there, where God's people come before the Lord. They lay their burdens before Him. They ask all kinds of questions. They groan in His presence, as they are wont to do, as we're going to see in Psalm 62, where it actually calls us to do that. And they find a way to have faith. And in Psalm 62, in its immediate context, there's a group of 4 there, 61, 62, 63, and 64, that sort of have similar themes. You'll find the word rock and refuge and way, and seems to be about a king or a king-like figure. The word king is mentioned in all those psalms except for Psalm 62, where we're going to find there he talks about my glory or my honor or something like that, and it seems to be a reference to that kingship. So in its context, it is a person who is um, got some secret enemies, not quite out in the front, and this person is in turmoil over this, how to handle this. And he finds a way of doing that by trusting in God. It's a very key theme in the Bible, and especially in the Hebrew Bible. It's a great
Yeah,
text.
yeah, we hear kind of a person of prominence,
Prominence.
probably a royal figure. Of course, this is set in the context of David. This is a
And
psalm that
David.
belongs to David. So you can read it kind of in a Davidic way, as a royal figure who is seated high, but there are people wanting to bring him down.
Yeah.
And they're doing so in the background. They're doing so
Right.
in kind of a secret. They're hiding it in their hearts. They're
Yeah.
deceitful, but they're assailing this person and trying to
Right.
knock them off their high horse, you might say.
Yeah.
Um, and the response of the person, the psalm is responding to that situation. What do you do? How do you handle when you have secret enemies
Right.
who are really trying to destroy you or undermine you? And that situation is something that we're all familiar with, right? We
We
all
are.
have a
We
sense
are.
of that we've had those moments, those
Yep.
times when we've had people who are friends to our face, but they are stabbing us in the back in secret.
Absolutely.
They're opposing us. They may say, "Yeah, great, that sounds like a good plan," and then they go back to another cubicle in their office and they start opposing the plan and they start trying to tear it
Exactly.
apart.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing we're talking about here. How do the people of God, how do the people who are walking in the way respond to
Right.
that sort of distress in their life and their trouble in their life?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well,
Psalm
that's a good
6,
question, and
yeah, go
that's where
ahead.
the psalm comes in
Yeah,
to help us do
exactly.
that. So
That's
it
kind of a
provides a
situating of
way.
the psalm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
So let's read the psalm, and Bobby, we'll give that task to you as we normally do. You're
Okay.
such a wonderful reader, so then we're gonna let you handle it. This is coming from the new international version, the 2011 version. And there are several places where there are some real differences in translation, and we'll talk about some of those as we go through. So, but first of all, Psalm 62.
Psalm 62. For the director of music, for Jeduthun, a psalm of David. Truly, my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. How long will you assault me? Would all of you throw me down? This leaning wall, this tottering fence? Surely they intend to topple me from my lofty place. They take delight in lies. With their mouths they bless, but in their hearts they curse. Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly, he is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depend on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts on him, for he is our refuge. Surely the low-born are but a breath, the high-born are but a lie. If weighed on a balance, they are nothing. Together they are only a breath. Do not trust in extortion, or put vain hope in stolen goods. Though your riches increase, do not set your heart on them. One thing God has spoken, two things I have heard. Power belongs to God, and with you, Lord, is unfailing love. And you reward everyone according to what they have done. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Oh, this is just a powerful psalm in terms of the expression of trust. I think when you look at verse 1 and verses 1 and 2, and then you look at verses
Yeah,
5 and 6, you see parallel lines. In the
parallel. Yeah.
in the first one, it's kind of an affirmation, an assertion, truly, or God alone, God only. This is my rock. This is my bedrock here.
That's right.
I'm going to rest in God. And then he talks to his own soul, right? In verse 5, I think that the NIV has it correct there that it's a self-address.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, this is my confidence, but I have to keep
Yeah.
reminding myself of this. I
That's
have
right.
I have to
That's
keep
right.
coming back to this to tell myself rest in God or trust in God,
That's right.
uh, because it's because all this stuff that's going on, I can get a little out of balance, you might say.
Absolutely.
So I have to remind myself to do that. So, Bobby, when we're looking at this phrase here that is used in verse 1 and then in verse 5, which the translation we just read, the New International Version, says rest. The
Right.
new RSV says wait in silence. And I
Right.
think the silence part is what kind of maybe bothers the NIV, because
Mm-hmm.
clearly the psalmist is not silent. He's going to tell people to pour out their hearts to God. So it's not silence in an absolute sense, but the Hebrew word does mean silent.
Yeah.
So how do you understand that? How do you make sense of that rest and waiting in silence?
Yeah, it is kind of an unusual way to begin the psalm, especially of praise, where normally you make noise in the psalter towards God. But here, the psalmist expresses confidence, and it seems like the trust or the faith is his weapon against the attackers. He doesn't take up a sword or a shield; he takes up my faith. This is my reply to them. But he says, "I'm going to sit in silence." I understand this to mean not lack of talking, because he does say, hey, pour out your heart. That's exhorting the congregation of the people. And he's confessing this apparently in worship. The whole psalm is set in that. But I think it refers to like the idea of quietness, the idea of stillness, that I go out and I want to understand this in the context of maybe the word shalom, that the storm is raging around me, kind of like the eye of a hurricane.
Yeah.
And you go into the eye of a hurricane, and that's where the Air Force sends C-130s in there to get all kinds of readings, and it's almost like a stillness. Where's the storm? But you look over there and you got 200-mile-an-hour winds, and you look over there, 200-mile-an-hour winds. But here, I'm safe. It's not that I'm silent, it's that I have found peace. I have found in the middle of this storm, I found the eye of the storm. I found a place of refuge. And that's where he goes. He says, the refuge, my rock, my salvation, those kind of images kind of emphasize that turmoil is going around, but right here, there's a safe spot. There's a safe spot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's as we talked about maybe before a little bit. We don't script out our conversation, but we do talk a little bit about
Yeah.
where we might go. Uh, but referencing Philippians about the peace that passes
The
understanding,
peace
that
that passes
yeah,
understanding. Absolutely.
I think that's kind of the feel here, that there's
Exactly.
the rock, the stability, the deliverance, the salvation, the rescue. I'm gonna
Exactly.
Only God can do that. Only God can give me that kind of confidence,
That's right. And
especially when
it is.
when I'm under attack, which we'll talk about more in just a moment.
Yeah.
Um, where am I going to find my stability? Am I going to find it in my friends? Well, yeah, friends can have a stable influence in our lives, but they all have clay feet, and they're not always there. And the church isn't always there, right?
Yeah.
And our money isn't always there. So it's where are we going to find a kind of stability that can give us the confidence we need in these kinds of moments? And it's only in God. And that word only, what is it,
Yeah.
used 6 times here?
It is.
Translated
Yeah.
alone or yes or truly or
Truly.
I think it's used like 6 times in this psalm, as if to
Yeah.
say there is no other place to go.
There isn't. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that word is going in this psalm. It's an exclusive. I can't find it anywhere else. And he's actually going to say, not in humans later on, nor in riches or anything else. It is God alone is where you're going to find this quietness, this peace that passes understanding. Another image for me would be Paul and Silas in prison. They just got beat, man. They just got beat. And what are they doing? They found it within themselves to sing psalms, and maybe even this one. But they found a place where they could sit and face the challenges, but do it in confidence. He used the word confidence a little while ago. I think that's a good word. That I have confidence that we're going to make it through this, that it's all going to be all right because of God.
Yeah.
God is the source of it all. This is where it's at. Don't put
When
it
you look
anywhere
at
else.
when you look at those first 2 verses, it's kind of like a didactic sort of thing. I'm teaching the
Yeah,
congregation. I'm telling the congregation, God alone. My soul is going to rest in God alone because God alone can handle this. God is my rock. God is my deliverance, my rescue. And then he addresses the assaulters.
that's right.
In verses
The
3
attackers.
and 4.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of like, all right, I don't, you can imagine in a congregational context. I don't know if he has somebody in mind as he's out
Yeah.
there, but uh, I'm gonna talk to my trouble. I'm gonna tell my trouble something, right?
Yeah.
And I think if we think about our prayer lives, sometimes we do that, right? We
We
speak to
do.
our trouble. We speak to the hurt and the pain that we have, or we speak
Absolutely.
in our prayers, we speak about those who are assaulting us, or those who
That's right.
we resent, or those who we're trying to figure out how to live with in peace. So how long are you going to assault me?
That's
How
right.
long are you going to try to knock me off? Try to knock down the wall. I'm a leaning wall. I'm a little fragile here at the moment,
Yeah.
and I'm vulnerable, you might say, because I'm tottering. I have a vulnerability, and you're going to use my vulnerability as a way of moving ahead with your project. You're
Exactly.
going to step on me to step over me, right? And to
Yeah.
step above me, that kind of
That's
thing.
right.
You're going to bring me down.
Yeah, and that question there in verse 3, how long will you assail me, implies it shows that whatever the psalmist says in verses 1 and 2 is an ongoing thing. It's something that is happening now. The storm, the attacks continue. And so the psalmist is saying, well, this has been going on for a while. I want to know when it's going to quit. Is it going to end in my destruction? It's kind of like Psalm 55, he says, it was you, my friend, who went to basically the temple or the tabernacle, and you are the one who betrayed me. And here, I think that's similar. It's kind of what's going on here. There's people who have the confidence of this person who's actually coming behind and uh, causing the pain, causing the assailing, and that really and truly in our life, those are the kind of betrayals that are the most painful,
Right,
the ones that are near us. Not
right,
people who we know don't care about us, but people who pretend that they are our friend, pretend that they care about us, and then lo and behold, we find out they're saying all kinds of things behind our back, and sometimes treating us very badly and actively pursuing our downfall. They batter the victim, as he says, or the some translations you can put that as they're getting pretty close to murder. It's like the idea you're gonna kill me,
right.
and
This is an assault, is an
that's
abuse,
right.
that sort of thing. Right,
Yeah. In verse 4, you can say, "Commit murder, each one of you." It's like, how long are you going to do this?
right. Now,
And
sometimes when we have the phrase "how long," like Psalm 13, it's addressed to God.
it
But
is
clearly, this is not addressed to God about how
right.
long. It's addressed to the people who are the problem, that are creating the problem.
Yeah,
And how long are you going to keep doing this? It's almost a frustration that we can all probably feel at times. Well, how long are you going to keep doing this?
right,
How long are you going to
right,
keep talking behind my back? How long are you going to keep trying to pull me down
right.
and step on top of me? It's kind of you get a sense of the internal turmoil that this psalmist is feeling. He's
Exactly,
feeling under
exactly.
assault. Right?
And it's that turmoil and the question that heightens the confession of faith. If God really is my rock and He's my salvation, then this ought to go away. But it's not. It hasn't happened yet. So I'm waiting patiently, as we might say from Isaiah, on
Mm-hmm.
the Lord. I mean, this is an exercise in faith. It is mystery. Why is this going on? It's lament. It's hope against hope. You people are doing this, but I believe God is my rock. He's my salvation. He's alone is going to take care of
Right.
this. In spite of this, in spite of what I see, in
Yeah.
spite of the evidence that I see, I trust. I trust the story. I trust the history, that the moment that I'm in, and this is why later on I think the psalmist talks to himself, because he is wrestling here, he is struggling here, that can produce the seed of doubt. The
Yeah.
seed of doubt would really be about Yahweh. Maybe
Right.
Yahweh, as they'll say in other texts, where's
Yeah.
your God?
Yeah.
I thought he was going to take care of you. I
Yahweh
mean,
doesn't have my back.
yeah, Yahweh didn't have my back.
Yeah.
And you can hear the assailants of Jesus. He said God was his father. And he's here hanging on the cross. So what's going to happen here?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So I think there is kind of the inner turmoil does yield a kind of implicit lament about
yeah,
where God is in the middle of all this assault.
yeah,
And we have the same thing in Psalm 13, where you have ultimately a trust in the chesed of God
absolutely.
in verses 5 and 6 of chapter 13. Now,
Yeah,
what I think in verse 4, this phrase, they take pleasure in falsehood and lying in their hearts, but the idea of they bless with their mouths and they curse with their hearts,
yeah,
that contrast really does speak to me because I think we experience that
absolutely,
at different
absolutely.
levels in our
Yeah,
lives, at different moments in our lives.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
They
go ahead.
want, at least to your face, congratulate you, but they really want to see you fall.
Right.
They would celebrate, maybe have a party in their head if you just fell and say, "Ah, man, I've just been waiting for this for a long time." Um, but they want to take part in that ruin, even if
Sure.
secretly. And
Sure.
I mean,
There's a
people have
fundamental
been,
evil there, isn't there? I mean,
there is,
that kind of
there's
hypocrisy that's there.
which the psalmist is going to say, all y'all are just basically deceitful in the first place. That's
Right.
why we don't trust humans, because they
Right.
look like something, but you never are sure. You're never sure.
Yeah.
Only history can tell the story. And I think that history is where we are in the psalm, where it ends. The history of God shows that I have reason to believe, I have reason to trust,
Right.
but the history of people show that given an opportunity, uh, they might stab you in the back.
Yeah.
Given the opportunity, they will enable your collapse as a person. And I think that's where this psalmist is, and actually the psalm itself is quite brilliant in its analysis of humans right here, what we're
Yeah.
capable of, in spite
Well,
of what we might even say to ourselves.
you might even say it's the two ways, right? There's the
It is
way
the
of
two ways.
the trusting in God, or the way of seeking your own gain and your own profit and your own success, even if you have to assault other people to get there, or you have to
yeah,
bring down others so you can raise up yourself. So you have two ways of
yeah,
living life. One that lives
right.
out of a trust in God, one that lives out of a calculating self-absorption, some narcissistic,
Manipulating.
manipulative,
Yeah. And
hypocrisy kind of thing, hypocritical kind of way of life. So
absolutely.
yeah, I think that in verse 5, then, as we said earlier, he's probably addressing himself.
I agree
Actually,
with that. Yeah.
as you think about, man, I am under attack and I am vulnerable here. I am a tottering fence. I gotta remind myself. I have to
Exactly.
shore up myself.
That's right.
Say, God, my soul. I'm going to talk to myself. Soul, rest in God, or
That's
find that
right.
peace in the silence, because I know my hope is only in God. Only God can handle this. Ultimately, I can't handle it
Absolutely.
by
Yeah.
myself.
So, yeah. So, I think you're right. This is where the person is engaging in what psychologists today might call self-talk. You
Hmm.
know,
Self-soothing, even.
it's right. This is what's going on, and I need to count to 10, and I need to take stock, number one, in who I am and whose I am. And if I know who I am, and knowing who I am, that means I belong to this person over here, which is God, then he really is my hope. My hope is in him. I can't even trust myself. I got to put an anchor, so to speak, in this place. And again, that's the eye of the storm. You're, as long as you're in the eye of the storm, you're actually pretty safe there. You're safe. Don't run that way, because if you do, you're going to run into all those gale force winds. You run that way, you do the same thing. God's the rock. He's the shelter. He's the shelter in the storm. He's the rock of ages, as Augustus
Yeah.
Toplady did with this particular psalm. This is where it's at.
This is where you
Um,
find rest, the rest that
that is
rest in
that's where
God. I
that's
am
where we
restless
find our
until I
rest in.
rest
That's
in
right.
God, right? It's kind of Augustine.
Yeah,
It's what,
yeah.
therapists tell us, at least in my experience, let's find that safe space. Let's find
Find a
that
safe space.
space, the happy space where we can be honest with ourselves, where we can recognize who we are and whose we are. Let's find that space. And in the midst of turmoil, and that's essential to be able to find that stable, safe place where we are
Exactly.
confident about our God and about our relationship with
That's right.
others as well as with God. So
And the
that's
testimony.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say the testimony of the Psalter and all of the Hebrew Bible is that safe place is God.
Right.
It is
The rock,
God is the
the
one.
refuge.
That's right.
Right.
That's where you go, regardless of the time, the place, the story. And you look at the history of Israel, Egypt or Babylon or the lion's den or wherever. This is where you find the place to be,
Right.
and you trust
So
in
if we
Him.
imagine the psalmist then addressing the congregation or the choir leader, which this is the choir director is supposed to do something with this, right? So the
Yeah,
choir is singing this to the church.
exactly.
Um, we find him addressing the church, you might say,
Absolutely.
addressing the assembly in
Yeah,
verse 8. Trust in him at all times, O people, and pour out your heart to him, for God is refuge for us. So it's not don't be silent.
that's right.
Tell God what's going on.
That's right.
And that's where you're going to find your sweet spot. That's where you're going to find your safe place. Was when
Yeah,
you trust God and speak to God and pour out to God.
that's right.
And if
Well,
you can't do it yourself, if you're in a situation where you don't have those words, then let us sing for you.
that's
Let
right.
us pray for you, and you become
That,
part of the assembly and listen and participate.
that's right. That's where the community of faith or the people of God, oh people here, it's plural, I mean, you come together and the congregation has faith for you. They pray for you. They sing for you. They are the ones that hold you up, and you live in and through their faith at times. It's here, we didn't mention it, but in his self talk, the psalmist says, suddenly changes those pronouns. Later, he's going to talk about our God and all that kind of jazz. But he says, He alone is my rock, my salvation,
Mm,
my fortress. And then he bears witness, so to speak, to the congregation and exhorts them out of that safe place that he has found, because there's people there, the whole people of Israel are there in the same place. Where's God? What's going on? The storms can really cause us to shudder in fear.
yeah.
And
So
this psalm says, we got it. We got it right here.
so
And
he moves from my refuge in verse 7 to God is a refuge for us in
us,
verse
that's right.
8. So he moves
That's
from
right.
the singular to the plural to give that
Absolutely.
communal dimension.
That's right.
And so
I'm part
so
of
he's
you
offering
and
a
you're part of
testimony.
me. So that's
He's
right.
offering his testimony, right? That
It is.
I can find this place, and you
That's
can
right.
find it too
That's
if
right.
you trust in God.
That's right. It is a testimony and exhortation. I think he becomes teacher here in the midst of the ongoing storm.
Hmm. Hmm.
We can get through this together, and it's very important to see here that Yahweh or God, the word divine name is not used in Psalm 62, but the storms don't go away. This is part of the mystery. God did not take the storm away, but we are finding refuge in the storm. And
Hmm.
this is,
Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
so
reminds you of Paul praying for the thorn to be removed, right? And God says,
absolutely, absolutely,
no, we're not going. You need that thorn."
absolutely. You need that thorn.
And so I'm going to leave it there. My grace is sufficient. You can find
That's right.
peace. You can find
Or,
rest in
my
me.
God, take this cup away from me.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
now,
No, 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 we're not going to do that.
we,
So
so
we get in verses 9 and 10, then the contrast between trusting in God and trusting in other things or other
yeah,
people. So where are you going to find that security and that trust in God, that trust that's going to give you the stability to walk through the storm, to be able to come out on the other side of the storm, you might say, or come through the
Yeah.
storm, or to live with yourself in the middle of the storm. Um, who are you going to trust? So in
Yeah.
verses 9, you're going to trust in people. Well, which people? The lowborn or the highborn? Well, it doesn't
That's
matter.
right.
They're both hevel. They're both
Yeah, they are
breath.
Hebel. That's right, from Ecclesiastes. And not
Yeah,
only, I think in verse 9, I don't remember what the NIV had there from reading it, but the New RSV has loads of low estate, but it's really the children of Adam. It's everybody.
it's
This is
everybody.
not
Yeah.
even not just the Israelites. This is everybody are not trustworthy. It
Hmm.
is
It's Adam.
they
Yeah.
are breath. They are vanity. They are again the old King James uses the
Yeah.
word vanity for Havel there, and it's like that's actually a pretty good word because it's something that's not trustworthy. It's not something. It's a vaporous.
It's
How do
not
you grab a
stable,
hold of the
right?
fog? I mean, you weigh the fog and you put that on the scale, and what does it do? We live with fog all the time in the bay. It's like, well, okay, what does it do? It does
It's
absolutely nothing.
it's an
And
illusion, right? It's a
it's an
delusion. It's an
illusion.
illusion. It's
And
right.
uh, and the psalmist says it. They are a delusion, not just an
Right.
illusion. It's
So you're right. I mean, this is sons
so
of Adam here in verse 9,
yeah.
it's
So
sons of Adam, not sons of Israel. It's talking
right.
generally about humanity. So we're learning
Yeah.
about humanity here, that they are the hevel, the breath, the
Yeah.
vanity, uh, the fog, you might say, that there's
Yeah.
nothing to hang on to there. I mean, there's an
Exactly.
instability there because
Yeah.
we all know that people are going to let us down, right? Whether
That's right.
they're highborn or lowborn, whether they're of low estate or high estate.
Exactly.
Uh,
And those people that know how to use power, and apparently the people who are pushing and waiting for him secretly to fall, they do know how to use power. They
right.
either have status themselves or they know how to uh, manipulate or twist or use
Hmm.
resources. And this the psalmist says, that's an illusion too. The people are deluded because they believe the illusion that these are the kinds of things that give you stability. His own situation shows that. If I, a high class, high powered individual, am now a leaning, tottering fence, that's an illusion. I am not stable, and neither are you. We got to find a place to have a rock, a shelter.
Right.
And if you put your trust in these people, like maybe I did before, maybe I trusted these people because they were my friend. Maybe I trusted them because they were a counselor. Maybe it was Ahithophel. Maybe it was Absalom. Who thinks whoever thinks their own son is going to do to you what Absalom did to David? I mean, who? What? How is it? You trust these people, and it's like it's an illusion. It's an
Or if
illusion.
it's
There's
not
only one
people,
place.
if it's not people, we think it's money.
Yeah,
That money
money,
will give us
money,
security, right? That
money,
we will,
and our culture buys into that hook, line,
yeah.
and sinker.
And in
If
verse
you got,
10, we have the word hevel again, this vain
that's
hope,
right,
vain hopes
vain
of
hope. That's
robbery.
right.
That's hevel.
So
So both human beings are hevel, and money's
exactly,
hevel.
that
It's not
yeah,
worth it. It's not
yeah.
stable.
That's
It's
where I
not going to
think the
rescue
psalm
you.
is got sort of a wisdom tint here, kind of an Ecclesiastes kind of thing, going on here. This stuff is vanity. This stuff is an illusion. Don't trust this. There's only one thing that matters in this world when the chips are down, and that's your relationship with God. He's the rock. He's the one that you hold on to because everything else will break your heart, so to speak. It will bring you to destruction. And
So
man,
as we think through the whole psalm, then it's kind of like the assertion, like, look, I'm going to find my safe spot in God, my
that's right.
refuge in God. I don't. These people are assaulting me. Uh, I'm vulnerable. Uh, so soul, trust in God. Keep your focus on God, and people, y'all do the same
That's
because
right.
human beings are but a breath, and money is but a breath.
That's right.
Here's what really counts: the two
That's right.
things that I have heard, right? The one thing
That's
I
right.
have heard God has spoken, and twice I have heard. Here are the two things that make the difference. And
Yeah.
that becomes the foundation of this trust. What
That's
are those
right.
two things, Bobby?
Well, they are power and hesed. And this is where I go more with the New RSV than the NIV, because I think the two things that have been heard is God's power to create, God's power in the universe, God's power to redeem. And God's power is something that is defined by or characterized by his steadfast love, his hesed. God used that power on behalf of the nobodies, as we saw last time we got together in Psalm 113. The Exodus lies in the background here from Exodus 15. That's the only other place where these two words occur together, is in Exodus chapter 15 in the Song of Moses. God is power, God is grace, or God is hesed. And
Exodus
and
15:13, right?
yeah, so and the psalmist says to the congregation, making a testimony, once God has spoken, twice I have heard. That means I've heard this over and over. This is a one step, two step thing. Again, this comes kind of out of the wisdom background here, kind of like a proverb. Um, this means I've heard over and over and over. This all my life, I have heard two things about God. And now this is why I have confidence that God is my rock and God is my refuge, God is my strength, that God has got power. They don't. God has hesed, which they have already proven they have none of. The fact that they can talk about you in their heart or curse you in their heart shows they have no loyalty at all. They have no hesedness. But God comes along, and these are the anchors in the whole biblical narrative, but especially in the Hebrew Bible.
Right.
Psalm 136 describes, doesn't use the word power there, but it describes how God's power created the universe, the
Right.
sun and
Creation
mind.
according to Hesed,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
Creation according to
And
steadfast love.
the second part of that, from verses 11 through the end of the Psalm in 136, is the power of God in redemption, bringing the
The
nobody
Exodus, right?
in the Exodus. That's right. And so I have reason to have confidence. And this is the basis, as I see it, of verses 1 and 2. Verse 11 and 12 is the basis for that statement of, of faith, confident faith. Even when I have to talk to myself, I still have confident faith because I know who God is. God has power. God has hesed.
Yeah. Let's
And
come back
it's,
to that those two things in creation.
yeah,
Creation is an expression of God's power, of course. He
that's right.
brings it out of nothing, but it is for the sake of love. It is for the
It
sake
is for the sake of love.
for a hesed. It comes out of that disposition of God to love
That's
others
right.
and
Yeah.
include others. And then the
Yeah.
Exodus is the same thing. It is
That's
the
right.
power to deliver from Egyptian slavery and the hesed that motivates that and
That's
moves
right.
that and the commitment. So these two things, power and love, you don't want a God without hesed because that's a tyrant. And you don't want a God with hesed but no power because that's
That's
not a
right.
deliverer, right?
That's right.
So
That's
these
right.
are the two foundational confessions of God, that
That's right.
God is loves us and God is able. And we see
That's
that
right.
in the story of Jesus, that God loves us and God is able. God
That's
loves
right.
us in the cross and God is able in the resurrection,
That's
right?
right. That's
Same
right.
story.
So I mean, those two words right there show us Yahweh or God is on our side. God is for us. And you just illustrated that in the cross and the resurrection, the whole 9 yards. But that's what it is. God is for us. God didn't create the world in order to prove that he could do it. God created the universe in order to express love. And to now I have a place where I can put humans and animals and everything else in, and I can express my love.
Yeah.
As Alexander Campbell once said, that the universe is the expression of God's love. It is the
Right.
theater
So
of
I'm going to
God's
trust
love.
God because God has a
Absolutely.
track record. God has a
God
track
has it.
record.
That's right. And
God has a list of accomplishments, you might say.
that's
And
right. A list of accomplishments.
God is in creation and Exodus and cross and resurrection. God has shown us who God is. And even when we are assaulted and we're feeling vulnerable and we're struggling, we can come back to this confession
That's right.
that Israel used to shore itself up. And it's a confession that we use to shore ourselves up, to soothe ourselves, to
Yeah.
say, trust, oh, my soul, trust in God,
Yeah.
because
This
God
is
is Hesed and God is able. All right.
that's right. This is God's resume right here in two things. God's
Yeah.
yeah, God's has power and God has hesed. And the power is conditioned by the hesed. I mean, that's the thing. God, it is it's how the power is used
Right.
is in the exercise of hesed.
And I'm not going to
Uh,
worry about what's going to happen to my assailants. I'm
I'm
not going to
not
worry
either.
about taking vengeance on my assailants. I'm not going to worry about bringing them down, doing evil for evil. I'm not going to try to undermine them
That's
and
right.
treat them the way they treated me because God will repay everyone
That's right.
according to their work.
That's
According
right.
to the way they follow, God will
That's right.
repay
That's
them.
right. You might be able to say that the weapon to fight the attackers is the confession of faith. You think you're gonna knock me down, but this is the weapon I have, which is faith. God is my rock. He's going to take care of it. And it's interesting enough that this psalm, as it ends, the Apostle Paul quotes this twice. Once in Romans 2, verse 6, and the other in 2 Timothy chapter 4, I believe. Um, this is, I have no reason to worry. God's got this all taken care of. God's gonna. I can trust in Him. I put my fate. I put literally my life in His hands,
My
and
destiny.
He will take. He will see me through. He will
As
see me
N.T.
through.
Wright would say, God's going to set it right. God
God
is
is
going
going
to
to set
set
it
it
right.
right. And God has the
Absolutely.
power and God has the hesed to set it right.
That's right.
Because this hesed involves justice, right?
Absolutely.
It includes righteousness, and it
That's right.
includes the kind of
Absolutely.
setting things right, as well
That's
as
right.
a steadfast love
Yeah.
for the covenant.
That's
Well,
right. And
Bobby,
that's where
go
the,
ahead,
the
give us kind of a concluding word here, if you will.
Well, I was just going to say that that's where it ends. I leave it in the hands of God. God's going to make it right. That's what it says there. God will. God's going to take care of me, and He's going to take care of y'all. This is not. It's really not my business what God does to you. I will simply trust in the story. I will trust in the God of the story, and therefore I will have peace. That's why my soul. That's why I am have quietness and the peace that passes understanding because I know the one who is holding me in the palm of his hand. And I think that's a good place to be.
Amen. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you for this. What a wonderful discussion. It's been encouraging to
Yep.
me. Hope it's been
Yeah, me
encouraging
too.
to everyone else.
Yep.
May the grace of
Me
our
too.
Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with us all.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Amen.